Welcome back to the channel. I'm the Fantasy Football Strategist, your NFL breaking news hub and the Dynasty and redraft implications behind said news. In today's video, I'm going to be discussing my top 24 Dynasty running backs and specifying them into specific tiers. Please remember to like and subscribe. With that being said, let's get right into the video. We begin with the F tier. This consists of Joe Mixon, David Montgomery, Tony Pollard, and Tyjae Spears. At 24 is Joe Mixon, running back of the Houston Texans. He's 6'1", 228, which gives him a 30.1 BMI. That's a workhorse level BMI, and he's been used as a workhorse throughout his entire tenure in the NFL. He's freshly signed by the Houston Texans, and it's a 3-year deal that's really at the very least a 1-year deal, more likely a 2-year deal. With him being 27.9, he is a little bit past the age apex, but he's shown no real signs of decline as of yet. He's always just been a solid player, but this is a quite potent offense, so it shouldn't shock anybody if he has probably a high-end RB2 season. It's just, is age going to catch up to him? It remains to be seen. Looking at how he's performed, he's been the RB4, 10, and 6 the past 3 years. It is important to remember that this was as a member of the Cincinnati Bengals. It's not as if he's going into a situation with a ton of target competition and competition in terms of carries either, for that matter. It should be a quite potent offense under Bobby Slowick and the Texans. So on a year-to-year basis, he's going to be a fine RB1, maybe RB2. I'd probably imagine he's more of an RB2 this year due to the fact with a little bit of an influx of competition coming into the league with Jonathan Brooks and Trey Benson, as well as him aging out potentially. In terms of how he's finished in a points per game basis the last 3 years, he's been the 5th, 7th, and 11th. So a little bit of a steady decline here, but he is going into the best situation that he's ever been in his entire life. So I think he could see a slight uptick in fantasy points per game, but even if he stays at around the 10 to 13 range, he's going to be a fine RB2 for you. When we look at the situation around him, it's rather elite. He has C.J. Stroud as his quarterback to help take the pressure off of him and really ensure defenses don't stack the box against him. They definitely won't be able to afford to do that. They have Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz around him, as well as the fact that Dameon Pierce is their RB2, so once again, there's nobody that's going to be threatening his workload. He should be a fine RB2 in 2024. Anything beyond that isn't guaranteed, and that's why he's my Dynasty RB24. My RB23 in Dynasty is David Montgomery of the Detroit Lions. Now, he is the second back in a rotation that includes Jahmyr Gibbs, who's much higher on this list for obvious reasons. But he's 5'10", 222 pounds with a 31.9 BMI. Definitely the requisite size to be a bell cow, and he has been at points throughout his career, but he's best used as the power back in a tandem, exactly how Detroit intends to use him. He's 27 even, so right on the edge of the bell curve of running back production, and he's dealt with some injuries recently, so you'll really take what you can from him, but he's in a fantastic situation in Detroit. He's finished as the RB 19, 24, and 17 the past couple of years, so not quite the high-end production, but he provides a very safe weekly floor. He's also given you the 12th, 27th, and 15th most points per game in that span, so a very safe RB2 range in terms of his points per game. He's just missed a little bit of time, which has led to him not having quite as much of a fantasy finish as high as his weekly performance suggests. Looking at their depth chart, they have Jared Goff at quarterback, who is no threat to rush in any way, shape, or form. So it does prevent him from taking off and then stealing rushing yards for himself. He is behind Jahmyr Gibbs in the pecking order, but it should still be a rotational backfield, and David Montgomery is a good bet to still receive a good market share of the red zone touches and goal line touches especially. Looking at the surrounding cast, they have Sam Laporta, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams. So Jameson Williams can stretch the field, Amon-Ra is going to hurt you from the slot, and Laporta is going to beat you down the seams and in the short area of the field. So in relation to David Montgomery, this is going to prevent the defenses from really being able to stack the box, which further increases his efficiency. Feel comfortable with him as probably a mid to low end RB2 on a seasonal basis, at least for the next year or two. But that's why he's my RB23, is he's probably not going to be anything for more than 2 years. At RB22, we have Tony Pollard of the Tennessee Titans. He was just signed to a 3-year deal that's really more of a 1 or 2 year deal because he's not going to play out the rest of his contract. At 6 foot, 210 pounds, he has a 28.5 BMI, well below the threshold for a workhorse back. And Dallas tried doing that this last year, and it just wasn't really good for him. He's going to be part of a tandem with the running back who's coming up next in Tyjae Spears. But with him receiving guaranteed money, he's really a good bet to be a solid fantasy back this year. And he's 27.2, so right about at the height of the bell curve for running back production, so he should have another year or two left in him. The past 3 years, Tony Pollard has been the RB 28, 8, and 14. So anywhere ranging from an RB3 to a low-end RB1 and a mid-RB2. Really, I project him to be a mid to low-end RB2 this year because he's going to be spending a lot of time sharing the ball with our next running back, Tyjae Spears, but really a solid asset to own is if he's your RB3, you're pretty happy. And with having guaranteed money, he's definitely going to be fed, and he's a good pass catcher as well. He's finished with the 30th, 8th, and 23rd most points per game the past 3 years, so kind of a wide range of outcomes in that regard. But they're going to want to take the pressure off of Will Levis, so he's going to be fed, and especially with them giving him a contract with guaranteed money, they're definitely not going to want to waste their investment. Looking at his situation, they have Will Levis, who was selected at the top of the second round in the 2023 NFL Draft. He looked good at various points in this past season, and he did have a comeback win, so things are potentially looking up for him, and they finally got him some talent. Obviously, they brought in Tony Pollard. They have Tyjae Spears, who's also going to be sharing the load at the running back position, but they signed Calvin Ridley to be their Z receiver. They have Hopkins to be their X, Tyler Boyd to be their Y, their slot, with Chig Okonkwo to be their tight end, so things are looking up for them. As I said earlier, Tony Pollard should be a mid to low end RB2 this year, and if he's your third running back, you're pretty happy. At RB21, and the final player in this F tier, I have Tyjae Spears, also running back for the Tennessee Titans. He's 5'10", 201, so he has a 28.8 BMI, and he's only 23 years old. He has 3 more years of guaranteed contract remaining, so we'll see if he gets an extension, maybe if he goes somewhere else, but he looked really solid in the passing game, and it's just that he's probably never going to be a full-time running back in the NFL due to his size. So that's why he's further down this list despite only being 23 and going into his second year. Looking at his stats, he finished as the RB34 with the 38th most fantasy points per game, but this was really due to Derrick Henry being in town and being a workhorse running back. Mike Vrabel's a stubborn, old-style head coach who just wanted to ground and pound with the big power back, so it was really detrimental to Tyjae Spears this past year. But with Mike Vrabel being kicked out of town and a new coaching staff in here, I expect better things for Tyjae Spears this year. But he's probably going to be somewhere in the RB3 range, maybe a low-end RB2, but probably not. It's just that due to age, he's a little bit higher than some of these guys. Looking at the depth chart, it's the exact same as how I mentioned with Tony Pollard. Pollard's probably going to get more carries than Spears, but Spears is probably going to out-target him. And neither have to worry about Will Levis rushing because he hasn't done so in the NFL, which is a bit surprising, but good for them at least. The offense should also be scoring more this year, so there's more scoring opportunity for Tyjae Spears, but I wouldn't project him to be the goal line back, although he's decently explosive enough to score from anywhere on the field, really, so I expect a couple touchdowns from him. He's going to be more of a safe floor player than a ceiling player. Once again, I'd probably project him to be in the RB3 range. The E tier consists of Alvin Kamara, Blake Corum, and Derrick Henry, 2 aging running backs and 1 younger running back that's in a murky situation. Alvin Kamara is 5'10", 214, so a 30.7 BMI. Ever since Mark Ingram left the Saints, he's been treated as a bell cow. He has 28.9, however, so he's on the older side of being a running back and well ahead of the age curve for peak production at the running back position. The past 3 years, he's been the RB 8, 16, and 11. But to be fair to him, if he wasn't suspended at the beginning of this past year, he would have been higher in 2023. He's had the 4th, 13th, and 3rd most points per game at the running back position, so Once again, if he wasn't 28.9, he'd be way higher on this list. The situation isn't very good, however, and he's a likely cut candidate at the end of this year, so his NFL future is kind of uncertain, which is really why, along with his age, he's so far down here in the rankings. His situation's terrible, to be frank with you. He has Derek Carr as his quarterback. That's awful. He is surrounded by Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, two capable wide receivers. Olave's really good, but Jawan Johnson at tight end, really not great. And they did draft Kendre Miller to try to replace him this past year, but Kendre Miller did not unseat Alvin Kamara in any way, shape, or form, and he might eat into his carries a little bit, but Alvin Kamara is still going to be a strong running back for this year. I project him to be a high-end RB2 this year. It's just the future is very uncertain, and he's probably going to begin declining very soon. My RB19 is Blake Corum of the Los Angeles Rams. He's 5'8", 205, with a 31.2 BMI, so he's kind of like a human pinball. He is, however, 23.6, so he's already almost 24 years old, and he hasn't even stepped foot on an NFL field yet. But once again, unless a running back is a very high-end running back, you're not looking for a second contract anyways. At least you're not guaranteed one. So he is in a murky situation, so that's why, despite not even being 24 years old, he's still pretty far down this list, just like Tajay Spears was. He was used as a bell cow at Michigan, having 1,100 yards rushing in each of the past 2 years, including 26 touchdowns this past year. He did suffer a gruesome leg injury in his junior year and did not look the same despite the immense touchdown production this past year. He's really more of a bowling ball and lacks game-changing speed that I really prefer in my running backs. He's not going to be breaking a 50-plus yard touchdown almost ever. He's going to get caught from behind, but at the very least, he does project to be a good goal line running back, and the Rams do score a lot of points, so that is a positive for him. Looking at his situation, he is behind Kyren Williams, so for another year or two, that's really going to hurt his short-term upside, which is why he's further down. He's going to need a serious injury to Kyren Williams in order to be a consistent producer. The Rams also like to use one featured back. They've never split running back reps before, really, so I don't project much of anything from him in the short term unless Kyren Williams gets hurt. They have Matt Stafford, an aging quarterback, Cooper Kupp, an aging wide receiver, along with Puka Nacua, who is a super stud and very young. So they're not going to be able to stack the box against the run, and Sean McVay is such a masterful schemer, I wouldn't be worried about that regardless. And Tyler Higbee at tight end, so a solid supporting cast, and if anything were to happen to the starter, Blake Corum has some serious upside. It's just he's unlikely to do anything unless that does happen. At RB18, I have Derrick Henry, newly acquired running back for the Baltimore Ravens. He's 6'3", 247, so he has a 30.9 BMI. He's been used as a workhorse his entire career. He is 30.5, though, so pretty advanced in age, and he's more of a year-by-year thing at running back. Looking at his career, he has been an absolute monster. He's finished as the RB 21, 4, and 8 the past couple of years, and 3 years ago he was hurt and only played 8 games, so that explains why. But he's been an absolute menace and really has been a solid RB1 almost his entire career, at least ever since he was allowed to be their RB1. The past 2 years he finished as the RB4 and RB16 in fantasy points per game, so kind of mixed results there. There does appear to be a slight decline in his production, but he should score so many touchdowns this year that he's going to have some big boom weeks for you. Looking at his situation, it's the best it's ever been for him. They have Lamar Jackson at quarterback, Zay Flowers and Bateman along with Aguilar to be their receivers, and star tight ends Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely at the tight end position, so a good balance of weapons around him that's going to make it quite challenging for defenses to stack the box like they have his entire career. As I said, he should be a very high touchdown scorer. I'd probably give him low-end RB1 to high-end RB2 production this year. It's just he could fall off a cliff at any point in time, and he could even fall off this year and not do anything. We really don't know, but the upside is absolutely massive for this year. The D tier consists of DeAndre Swift, Isaiah Pacheco, Josh Jacobs, James Cook, and Rashad White. DeAndre Swift is my RB17. He is going from the Eagles, which is a fantastic situation, to the Bears, which is also a potentially great situation. He was signed to a 3-year contract, which is really a 1 to 2 year deal. And with him being 5'8", 212, he has a 32.2 BMI, which is absolutely fantastic. And at just 25.4 years old, he still should have another year to potentially 3 at max of really solid RB production for you. Looking at his past production, he's been the RB 15, 21, and 20 these past 3 years. He scored the 8th, 15th, and 24th most points per game in the past 3 years. This ranges anywhere from a low-end RB1 to a low-end RB2, so kind of mixed results there, but he should be a solid RB2 for you, at worst a low-end RB2. The offense should score a significant amount of points, and they'll definitely want to take the load off of their rookie quarterback, so he's definitely not declining or anything. Looking at the situation, it's fantastic. They have Caleb Williams at quarterback. They have him at running back. Roshan Johnson's not much of a threat to his workload. They have DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Roma Dunze, and Cole Kmet. So it's going to be incredibly challenging for defenses to stack the box against the Bears, and he should have a lot of open running room for him. He's probably going to be an RB2 this year, and with him not even being 26 years old, you should definitely project to have a couple more years of him, even if he's not going to be a high-end RB by any means. At RB16, I have Isaiah Pacheco of the Kansas City Chiefs. He's 5'10", 216, so a 31.0 BMI. He's been a workhorse running back throughout his tenure with the Chiefs, and he's 24.3, so he still has a couple more years left in the league. He has 2 more years guaranteed on his rookie contract. After that, it remains to be seen, though. He was the RB37 and 15 the past 2 years, so this past year, at least, he was a solid RB2, if not kind of a high-end RB2, and he was the bell cow for the Chiefs, and they haven't really done anything to address that, which is great for him. He finished 44th and 14th in fantasy points per game the past 2 years. He's really a human bowling ball at running back. He runs as angry as anyone I have ever seen at the running back position. He is a freight train in the open field, and with the 4.3 speed in which he possesses, he is absolutely dangerous. Looking at his situation, he has the league's best quarterback in Patrick Mahomes. They also have Rashee Rice, Marquise Brown, and Xavier Worthy, so a bunch of speed as well as a big slot around him. Travis Kelce's still kicking it, and he's really the only credible running back there. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a massive bust, so you should expect solid RB2 production. He could potentially be a low-end RB1, but I'd still guess that he's more of an RB2, and he has at least 2 more years of being guaranteed to be the running back in this offense, so enjoy it while you still can. At RB15, I have Josh Jacobs, newly acquired running back for the Green Bay Packers. Standing at 5'10", weighing 220 pounds, he has a 31.6 BMI, well above the 30.0 threshold for being a workhorse back, and he's been a workhorse back his entire career. He's still only 26.4 years old, so he still has quite a few years left of production, and he was signed to a 3-year deal that's really more of a 1 to 2 year deal that I suspect will play out as 2, and what should be a quite potent attack for the Packers offense. The past 3 years he's been the RB 11, 3, and 28, although this past year he dealt with injuries or he would have finished much higher. He's finished with the 13th, 3rd, and 18th most fantasy points per game during this stretch, and once again, 2023 I would throw out there. He's much closer to a median of the previous 2 numbers there. And I project him to be a low-end RB1 this year, and as long as he's in Green Bay, he should absolutely be a mainstay in that general range. The situation in which Josh Jacobs finds himself in is the best he's ever had. No Drake. He has Jordan Love at QB, along with Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, so a lot of pass-catching options around him, but as far as the running back position, he's definitely going to be featured there. As I said earlier, it would not shock me if he's a low-end RB1 who could, if he really performs well, be a mid-RB1, but probably around that 8 to 10 range, and for the next 2 years or so, you should expect more of the same. My RB14 is James Cook, running back of the Buffalo Bills. Standing at 5'11", 199, he does have a 27.8 BMI, which is pretty low, but he should be a very solid player in this offense with a huge target share. There are a ton of vacated targets with Stephon Diggs leaving town and Gabe Davis, so expect him to be a very high floor player. He's still only 24.7 and has 2 more years remaining on his rookie deal, and with the possibility of being extended, he's in a really good spot to produce. He's been the RB44 and RB12 the past 2 years, so definitely a big step up in his second year, with the probability of being a solid RB2 once again. He scored the 15th and 19th most fantasy points per game during this stretch, but I expect with the departure of a lot of the weapons in the Bills' offense for him to take a massive step up in the receiving game, thus giving him a higher floor. The situation is really, really good. He has star quarterback Josh Allen at the helm at QB, along with Khalil Shakur, Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, not too inspiring at the wide receiver position, but they do have star tight end Dalton Kincaid there. They did draft Ray Davis to be kind of a power goal line back, but James Cook was never really scoring that many rushing touchdowns anyway, so this really didn't hurt his fantasy value in any way. He's going to be a very safe floor option with probably not as much of a ceiling, but once again, he's probably your RB2 or preferably RB3 anyways, and if you were going to insert him in a bye week situation, you definitely want a high floor so that you don't lose your fantasy matchup. Expect mid to low end RB2 production. My RB13 is Rachaad White of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's 6', 214, so a 29.0 BMI. He is already 25.4 because he was really old coming out as a prospect. Now, while he was the RB4 this past year, Dave Canales is out of town. They've been talking nonstop about reducing his workload, and he's really one of the least talented runners of the football there is. I expect some serious regression from him. He's finished as the RB 36 and 4 the past 2 years, so a huge step up from his first year to second year. But once again, with the departure of Dave Canales, I expect that to seriously regress. He also had the 42nd and 10th most fantasy points per game, so his fantasy finish was more reflective of the fact that he stayed healthy the entire year. As I said, he is really one of the least talented runners of the football that there is in the NFL. Expect serious regression. I think he's going to be more of a mid to low end RB2. Now, the situation that he finds himself in is actually pretty good. He has Baker Mayfield at the helm at QB, not stealing anything rushing-wise. Then he has Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Trey Palmer, Cade Otton around him. So really a lot of talent around him that makes it hard for defenses to stuff the running game, which makes it more surprising that he was unable to do anything this past year and kind of sad, but he's a fine receiver, and he's going to be a lot more of a floor player this year. As I said earlier, the coaching staff says that they want to take away touches from him, and they definitely should, at least rushing-wise. So his ceiling is going to be massively reduced. As I said, probably a mid to low-end RB2. The C tier consists of Kenneth Walker, Kyron Williams, Trey Benson, and Jonathan Brooks. Kenneth Walker is my RB12. He is insanely talented. Being 5'9", 211, he has a 31.2 BMI. Great for being a workhorse running back, even though he's not projected to be. And he's still only 23.7. He is one of the most talented rushers in the NFL. He's not that great of a receiver, but he's not a zero in the passing game either. He's finished as the RB 18 and 19 the past 2 years. He's done this with the 16th and 20th most fantasy points per game. But he has an incredibly high amount of upside on a week-to-week basis because he's about as big of a threat to break a 75-yard touchdown as anybody. And like I said, one of the most talented runners of the football that there is in the NFL. He also has 2 more years guaranteed on his rookie contract, and he shouldn't have any trouble finding a second contract somewhere. He's just not going to be a featured running back, at least for these next 2 years. As far as his situation goes, it's pretty solid. He has Geno Smith, a non-rushing quarterback that's definitely not stealing any touchdowns from him. He's surrounded by a lot of talent in the receiving room with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and JSN. Noah Fant's fine as a tight end too. He is, however, in a split backfield with Zach Charbonnet, who they also drafted in the second round of this past year. I do expect Kenneth Walker to hold on to the goal line role, so he should have a lot of touchdown upside. And as I said, he's a consistent threat to score from 75 yards out, so he should have some big boom weeks. It's just that the floor is a little bit lower with him not being featured. Expect mid RB2 production with big boom weeks from time to time. My RB11 is Kyren Williams of the Los Angeles Rams. He's 5'9", 194, so he only has a 28.6 BMI and he's under 200 pounds, which makes it surprising that the Rams treated him as a bell cow back because he does not have the requisite size for that. He is, however, only 23.8 years old, so he's still relatively young. They did, however, draft Blake Corum in the third round, so while the Rams have always used a featured back, it may change this year. He still has a lot of upside, though. He's finished as the RB 88 and 7 the past 2 years, although if he wouldn't have been hurt this past year, he more than likely would have challenged Christian McCaffrey for RB1 status because he had some giant boom weeks. He's also had the 69th and second most fantasy points per game. The fantasy points per game were only trailing Christian McCaffrey, so like I said, he would have been challenging him, but he probably would have finished as the RB2 if not for a couple injuries this past year. Looking at the Rams depth chart, it's pretty good. He has Matt Stafford as his QB, along with Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, Demarcus Robinson, and Tyler Higbee around him as pass catchers, so should be a pretty potent offense. The potential downside, though, is he is under 200 pounds and under the 30.0 threshold for being a workhorse back. And while the Rams have treated their running back situation in a workhorse role, you had Todd Gurley before him, now you have Kyren Williams, he is not the size to be a workhorse running back, and them drafting Blake Corum in the third round suggests that they're either going to split time or he's going to be on somewhat of a thin leash, especially considering he only had fifth-round draft capital, so the team didn't invest a lot into him to begin with. If he stays healthy, expect elite RB1 production, assuming he keeps his bell cow role, but there's a definite possibility that he's in a split backfield, or if he does get hurt, Blake Corum could snatch that RB1 role from him, and then it's goodbye because they didn't invest too much to get him in the first place. My Dynasty RB10 is Trey Benson of the Arizona Cardinals. Standing at 6 foot, weighing 216 pounds, he has a 29.3 BMI, just under the 30.0 threshold for being a bell cow, but I think once James Conner gets hurt, he's going to be their bell cow. They drafted him at the top of the third round with a second pick in the third round this year, and he's still only 21.9 years old, so he's going to be 22 during this year, so he should have plenty of longevity left, 4 years of a guaranteed contract with the possibility of an extension. Things are looking really good because he should be in a quite potent offense this year. So he's a rookie, so he hasn't had any NFL production, so there's no fantasy points per game to look at. And he wasn't ever a workhorse back at Florida State, but they don't run that kind of system. They use a committee approach, so I wouldn't take that as necessarily a detriment to him. He's going to be fresher, actually, so less tread on the tires, so potentially for a longer NFL career. That's good for him. He did set a 10-year record for PFF's elusiveness rating, beating out the likes of Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall, who are all higher on this list. So that's elite company. And he has a 4.39 40-yard dash with over 120 speed score. So he is a freight train in the open field. He possesses a monster stiff arm. Good luck catching him from behind. That's just not going to happen at all. He is going to be an absolute weapon for him as soon as he steps foot on the field. Looking at the situation in which he finds himself in, it's fantastic. He has Kyler Murray at quarterback with MHJ Michael Wilson at wide receiver. You got star tight end Trey McBride. So a potent offense. And once James Conner, who is age 29 and has never played more than 13 games in a season, gets hurt, he's going to easily take over that role. And he is going to be a monster running back. He's going to have giant spike weeks and consistent production because he has soft hands out of the backfield. He made an over-the-shoulder catch where he had to twist and contort his body to catch it if you look at his college film. And he can run wheel routes, flats, Texas routes. He's going to be almost what you could consider a passing game weapon for him But nonetheless, he's going to be a great player in either standard or PPR, and Dynasty and redraft for a long time. My RB9 is Jonathan Brooks, running back out of Texas, who currently is employed by the Carolina Panthers. Standing at 6 foot 216, just like with Trey Benson, he has a 29.3 BMI, so below the 30.0 threshold, but I strongly believe he is going to be treated as a bell cow back. He's only 20.9 years old, so really, really young as well, coming off an ACL tear, but him being drafted as the first running back despite that and still in the second round is pretty impressive. He's a rookie, so there's no fancy points per game to look at here, but you'll notice that he didn't do anything until he was a junior in college. Well, he was behind the likes of Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson. Bijan Robinson's a superstar, and Roschon Johnson's a solid power back. That explains why, but then when he did step foot on the football field in his junior year, he absolutely tore it up before that ACL tear. He is incredibly elusive. He's great in space, tremendous vision, and he is a great yards after catch running back. He's going to be somewhat of a passing game weapon as well. He also finds himself in a Dave Canales offense, and Dave Canales made Rachaad White good this past year. Jonathan Brooks is actually talented, unlike Rachaad White, at least when it comes to running the ball, so we should expect big things from him as he gets further removed from his ACL tear down the stretch. As I said earlier, Dave Canales was hired to be the head coach. He's resurrected Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield the past 2 years, so he should really help 2023 first overall pick Bryce Young. Looking at the RB room, there is nobody to be scared of. Chuba Hubbard is really bad, and Miles Sanders has been washed for years. Nothing to worry about. They also acquired Deontay Johnson. They still have Adam Thielen. They drafted Xavier Legette in the first round. And the tight end room consists of Tommy Tremble and JT Sanders. So the offense should be scoring a decent amount of points and probably be somewhere in the middle of the pack this year. But what really matters is that Jonathan Brooks is going to be a featured back in a Dave Canales system. Expect high-end production from him at the latter half of the year. And in the future, expect low-end RB1 numbers on a consistent basis. The B tier consists of Saquon Barkley and Devon Achane. Barkley's 6 foot 233 with a 31.6 BMI. He has been and will continue to be a workhorse running back who's one of the most talented RBs in the NFL. He's 27.4, so right around the peak of the age apex for RB production, but he's so talented that he could definitely afford to lose a step and still be one of the best RBs in the game. He's also going from the absolute worst situation imaginable for a running back in New York with the Giants to one of the best RB situations in the entire league with the Philadelphia Eagles. We should expect some really high-end production this year. Saquon Barkley's finished as the RB 35 and 13 in the past 3 years. He has dealt with some injuries this past year and 3 years ago, so that kind of explains why he hasn't been the elite RB1 that we would expect on an annual basis. And he's had the 27th, 5th, and 9th most fantasy points per game during this stretch, which is really very impressive considering he was the only receiving threat in any way, shape, or form in New York. Poor Malik Neighbors. But this isn't about him. This is about Saquon Barkley. So he's leaving that situation for a much better situation where we are going to expect high-end production from him. He should score quite a few touchdowns this year. Looking at the Eagles' depth chart, it is star-studded. Jalen Hurts is the quarterback, and he's going to steal some rushing touchdowns, but I think he's not going to steal quite as many as he has from other running backs, and I think that's one reason they brought in Saquon Barkley, to keep him healthy. It was reported that he was dealing with a leg injury this past year, so there's probably some touchdown regression for him, which is only going to benefit Saquon Barkley. The RB room consists of Barkley, Kenny Gainwell, and Will Shipley. No one is stealing touches from Saquon. The only time he's coming off the field is when he's tired, which isn't going to be very often. They also have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert in the receiving corps, so it's going to be a quite potent offense that's going to be very hard to stop, and they're not going to be able to do anything about Saquon Barkley because if they try to stack the box there, they're going to be eaten alive through the air. I definitely project a high-end RB1 season from him, It shouldn't shock anybody if he is the RB1, and I'd probably put him around the RB5 to 6 this year if I had to predict where he's going to finish. So a mid to high end RB1. My RB7 is Devon Achane, and this is more so a reflection of what the market thinks about him than my own personal feelings on him. He'd be a little bit lower if it was just strictly how good I think he's going to perform. I just think that you could sell him for quite a bit right now, and that's kind of why he's ranked this high. He's 5'9", 188 pounds, so only a 27.8 BMI. That's really low. And he's only 22.7. Going into his second year, he has 3 more years of guaranteed production on his rookie contract, and what's an extremely potent offense, so he has very high upside on a weekly basis. Devon Achane finished as the RB24 while playing in 11 games. He did have the 5th most fantasy points per game, but that's greatly booned by the fact that he had that 50-point game against Denver. If he had played an entire season, that number would have gone way further down, in my opinion. And he's more than likely going to be hurt from time to time throughout his entire career, being so small. I would probably try to sell him if I could while he still has this extreme value, because if he keeps getting hurt, people are not going to value him this highly. Now, as far as his situation, he's in about as an ideal of a situation as you could ask for. Tua is no threat in the running game at quarterback. They have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle to clear out space for him to be able to run. Along with OBJ, we'll see if he is really able to play an entire year and how effective he'll be. But it should still scare defenses. And they brought in Jonnu Smith to be tight end, and he's a great blocking tight end who's a decent receiver as well. And really, you don't want him to be a featured back because he's less than 190 pounds. So with them having Raheem Mostert and drafting Jalen Wright, that's kind of good for him in a sense, but it does limit his potential upside because he's going to be in somewhat of a 3-way committee. And when Raheem Mostert retires or is traded or let go, he's still never going to be the featured running back. Really, he's going to be a high upside player on a week-to-week basis that's probably not going to be available too often for you from time to time. And I would once again try to sell him if you can. He's probably never going to end up as an RB1 because he's going to be hurt so often, but he is going to have extremely high RB1 weeks from time to time. The A tier consists of Travis Etienne, Jonathan Taylor, and Christian McCaffrey. Travis Etienne stands at 5'10", weighing 215 pounds, so that's a 30.8 BMI. Solid workhorse level BMI for him, and he has been a workhorse throughout his career. He's only 25.4 years old, and he projects to have probably 3 years left of production, 2 more on his rookie contract, and then potentially a franchise tag. So you should expect a couple more years of production from him in what should be a relatively high-scoring offense considering the Jaguars drafted a vertical threat to help clear out defenses and keep them from being able to stack the box so much against him. He was hurt in his rookie year and didn't play, but he finished as the RB17 and RB3 the past 2 years, obviously taking a massive step up. He's been a workhorse running back for them, and he is one of the most explosive players on a per-touch basis in the NFL. He's finished with the 23rd and 7th most fantasy points per game, and his RB3 finish this past year was really buoyed by the fact that he played the entire year. Like I said, he's one of the most explosive players on a per-touch basis, and one thing that is interesting is the more touches you give him, he becomes a little bit less explosive, so if they would potentially give him a couple less touches a game, that actually might help his efficiency and give you a better fantasy finish for him. Looking at his situation, he has Trevor Lawrence as his QB. He can steal touchdowns from time to time, but he's not generally that much of a threat. They do like to use Etienne on the goal line. The running back room, besides Etienne, is pretty bad. Tank Bigsby and D'Ernest Johnson are the only threats for him, and they're not really much of threats. They said that they want to use Tank Bigsby more, but when they tried that in Tank Bigsby's rookie year in 2023, things did not go well for them. So I do expect him to be a workhorse for them, even though it might be a little bit better for his longevity and per-play efficiency if he wasn't used in a workhorse role, but it is what it is. He's going to be a great fantasy back for you regardless. They also have Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, Brian Thomas Jr. in the receiving core, along with Evan Ingram at tight end. So they're going to have a pretty potent attack this year, and it's going to be a little bit harder than it has been in years past for them to stack the box against ETN, which should help his per play efficiency and help keep him in the mid RB1 range. At RB5, I have Jonathan Taylor of the Indianapolis Colts. Standing at 5'10", 226 pounds, he has an impressive 32.4 BMI. He has been and will continue to be a workhorse for the Colts. And at 25.4, he is on his second contract, but he's likely going to be in the league for probably another 3 to 4 years, and he's going to be a mainstay at the RB1 position for you. The past 3 years, Jonathan Taylor's finished as the RB1, RB33, and RB33 again this past year. His 2021 season was absolutely ludicrous. He has dealt with injuries the past 2 years, and he did hold out for a new contract at the beginning of this past season, so that does explain his fantasy finishes not being as high as you might expect from somebody this high on the list. And he had the first, 17th, and 12th most fantasy points per game during this time. I expect things to go a little bit better for him. He's going to have Anthony Richardson at quarterback, which will steal touchdowns away, but will also make it harder for defenses to stack the box against him. And he is one of the most powerful running backs in the league, and he has fantastic vision. Before I get into the depth chart, he has Shane Steichen as his head coach, one of the most creative play callers in the NFL. So that's going to really help this offense get chugging. And with Anthony Richardson at quarterback, like I said, it's going to steal touchdowns away from him, but it's also going to make it harder for defenses to stack the box against him. They also have Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs, and they just drafted A.D. Mitchell in the second round, so their receiving core is going to scare defenses, along with the masterful play calling of Shane Steichen. Their tight end room is nothing to really speak about, but Jelani Woods is 6'7", so he's a potential red zone threat for him. Really, you should expect mid RB1 production from Jonathan Taylor for the next couple of years until he falls off. My RB4 in Dynasty is Christian McCaffrey, running back for the 49ers. At 5'11", 202, he has a 28.2 BMI, which is really low, but he has been and will continue to be a workhorse running back for the 49ers. At 28.0 years old, he's past the curve for peak running back production, but he's also one of, if not the most talented running backs in the NFL, so you should expect really good things from him until he falls off. And after dealing with significant injuries earlier in his career, he's actually been healthy for the past couple of years. So he's going to be an elite RB1 for you. The past 2 years, Christian McCaffrey's finished as the RB2 and RB1, while coincidentally also having the second most and most fantasy points per game during this stretch. He's a versatile weapon in the passing game and the running game. He's a featured back, and he's in one of the best offenses in the NFL with one of the best offensive minds at head coach in Shanahan. So really, you should expect more of the same from him, and he's still going to continue to be an elite RB1 until he falls off a cliff due to age. Looking at the depth chart, it's impressive. Brock Purdy has been a pleasant surprise for the 49ers. Mr. Irrelevant has turned into a real stud of a QB. But more importantly, he's not a threat to McCaffrey in the run game, so that's awesome. Looking at the running back room, Mitchell is made of glass. He is no concern. They did, however, draft the most athletic running back in NFL history in Isaac Guerendo. Although his technical skill at the RB position is nowhere near McCaffrey's, so he might steal touches here and there, but expect big things from McCaffrey. They have Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk at the receiver position, along with first-round rookie wide receiver Ricky Pearsall. Solid, might I say, elite group of wide receivers, along with an elite tight end in George Kittle, who's a fantastic receiver and an even better blocker. They're going to be scoring tons of fantasy points for you, all of them. But most importantly, they're going to be scoring a lot of touchdowns, and for Christian McCaffrey, that's going to be a great thing. He's going to be a featured back, and he probably projects to be the RB1 overall, but at worst, he'll be a top 3 finisher at the position, barring injury. The S-tier running backs consist of Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan Robinson, and Breece Hall. As far as Gibbs is concerned, he's 5'9", 199, which is a 29.4 BMI, which is below the threshold of a workhorse running back, but he's also not used as one, and it's actually good for him. At only 22.3 years old, he's also really young, going into the second year of his rookie contract, and as a first-round pick, he's more than likely to receive, first of all, his fifth-year option, but then also be franchise tagged. So he should really have 5 more years of production for you, and he is so talented. In his rookie year, he finished as the RB10 with the 8th most fantasy points per game. This is actually more impressive than you think. At the beginning of the year, he was really brought along slowly, and it was concerning a lot of managers, including me. But he really came along as the year progressed, and he is a weapon in the passing game. This guy can be on the field at any point of time. He's good around the goal line as well. And towards the latter half of the year, he was receiving a lot of goal line touches in what should be a really high-scoring offense once again. This guy is incredibly explosive with some of the best acceleration. The only running backs I can think of with better acceleration could be Travis Etienne and Devon Achane, but he is right up there. He has incredible vision for cutbacks. He possesses nasty juke moves, and he knows how to work angles on defenders. And did I mention he's a receiving weapon? This guy can run routes with the best of them. He is just a tier below Christian McCaffrey in that regard. Now, teams always say this, but they've been talking about wanting to get him more slot work, and boy, would he be dangerous if they did that. He's one of the few running backs that I would actually pay credence to if coaches said that. Looking at his situation, it's awesome. He has the best line in the entire league. Jared Goff poses no threat in the running game, and he's a consistent, safe game manager type. Perfect. He's going to be sharing the backfield with David Montgomery, which does hurt his maximum upside, but it's going to keep him fresh and allow him to have more longevity in the NFL. As far as the other weapons go, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta, these are all awesome weapons that make it absolutely impossible to guard this offense. He is going to run through wide open lanes consistently. He's going to be fed out of the backfield because Jared Goff will not run. Expect elite production from him on an annual basis, and he should be a top 5 running back this year. At RB2, I have Bijan Robinson of the Atlanta Falcons. He's 5'11", 215 with a 30.0 BMI. He has a workhorse build, and finally, with dumb Arthur Smith finally gone, he's actually going to be utilized as a workhorse. Imagine your 8th overall drafted running back not being used and being a good decoy. Anyways, he's 22.4 years old and one of, if not the most talented running backs in the league. He's probably a touch below Breece Hall and Christian McCaffrey, but right up there with Saquon Barkley in terms of pure talent. And he possesses the nastiest stop-start ability and juke move in the entire league. And he's also a solid receiving back. He finished his rookie year as the RB9 with the 17th most fantasy points per game. But once again, this is more so a product of Arthur Smith and his terrible coaching tenure with the Falcons. It also affected Drake London and Kyle Pitts. Once again, he said that all 3 of these guys are great decoys. Well, yes, that's true. Great players are great decoys. But it's also good to, use them, especially when you chose to draft them along with Terry Fontenot. So, the days of Tyler Algier being featured instead of Bijan are long gone. No need to worry about that. Like I said, he possesses the nastiest stop-start agility and juke move in the entire NFL. He can also hurdle you, and he's a great receiver as well. He is going to be one of, if not the best running backs for quite a long time here. As far as the situation goes, he has the most improved surrounding cast of anyone in the league, and that's really just due to the 2 QB upgrades. The days of Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke are finally over, Falcons fans. With them signing Kirk Cousins to a 4-year deal and drafting Michael Penix 8th overall, you not only have one good quarterback, you probably have 2. One for now and one for the future. This is perfect for them. As far as the running back room's concerned, Bijan Robinson is so much better than Tyler Algier. There's nothing to worry about there. Tyler Algier should barely see the field this year. They also have Drake London and Kyle Pitts in the receiving core. Darnell Mooney's fine too. So it's going to be a much improved offense, and we should expect elite, high-end RB1 production from Bijan from now into the distant future. And just like Jahmyr Gibbs, he probably has at least 5 more years of elite RB1 potential and guaranteed time playing for the Falcons. If you made it this far, please like and subscribe. It would mean the absolute world to me. Getting to Breece Hall, at 5'11", 217, he has a 30.3 BMI. Perfect for being a workhorse, and he has been and will continue to be a workhorse for them. He's only 23.1 years old. He was drafted at the top of the second round in 2022, so he doesn't have the fifth-year option, but he's absolutely going to be signed to a long-term extension, probably with them. He is way too talented to not have an extension at some point. And in my opinion, he's the second most talented running back in the NFL, only behind Christian McCaffrey. This guy's going to be an elite RB1 for you until his career falls off once he probably reaches 28, 29 years old. He's going to be a workhorse the entire time. You're going to really enjoy having him, and I would absolutely look to acquire him anywhere you can. He finished as the RB42 in his rookie year due to being injured with an ACL tear, and he finished as the RB2 with the 6th most fantasy points per game in this past year, which his situation was just about as bad as it gets. Terrible offensive line. Aaron Rodgers got hurt. They had nobody at quarterback. Think about this. Zach Wilson was their best quarterback. Their best quarterback was worse than the 32nd best starting quarterback, and he still managed to be able to finish as the RB2. He is one of the best receiving backs in the NFL, and his target share reflects that. This guy is an absolute monster. He is one of the best, if not the best, at working angles and shocking defenses with his elite burst and acceleration, nasty juke moves, excellent vision, and top-end speed. He is a freight train when he gets down the field. If he can get 10 to 20 yards, you're not tackling him. He also possesses a nasty, nasty stiff arm. Looking at his situation, it is so much more improved with Aaron Rodgers being back for them. They might finally be able to pass the ball, which will really, really help Breece Hall. It should shock nobody if he's the RB1 this year, and he should be scoring a lot of touchdowns, assuming Rodgers stays healthy. Really, Garrett Wilson is the only incredible talent around him, besides Rodgers, obviously. Mike Williams is a fine receiver that'll play 3 games and then get hurt. Malachi Corley was drafted to be a slot receiver. He's kind of like a baby Deebo Samuel, but not too much to be worried about. Tyler Conklin's at tight end. Breece Hall is going to be featured and in a big way. He's going to score so many touchdowns this year, and he's one of the running backs that probably has about a weekly floor of 15 fantasy points per game this year, with a ceiling of over 40 points. This guy is going to be a monster for you. Draft him anywhere you can. Trade for him if you can. If I'm an owner, I am not selling unless it's for one of these other running backs in the same tier plus a first-round pick. He is going to be a mainstay as an elite RB1, and if you own him, good for you. Don't let him go unless it's for one of these other running backs plus a first-round pick. So to conclude my running back rankings, Joe Mixon, David Montgomery, Tony Pollard, and Tajay Spears make up the last tier. Then we have Kamara, Corum, and Henry in the next tier, followed by Swift, Pacheco, Jacobs, Cook, and White. Then Walker, Williams, Benson, and Brooks. Barkley and A-Chain in their own tier. Then Etienne, Taylor, and McCaffrey in the second tier, followed by Gibbs, Bijan, and Breece in the elite tier, S tier of running backs. So is there anything you agree with, disagree with? Should I have put somebody else in the rankings? Should somebody be higher or lower? Please let me know in the comments section. Let's get some engagement going. And with that being said, I'm the Fantasy Football Strategist, your NFL breaking news source. and the Dynasty and redraft implications behind said news, please remember to like and subscribe. It would mean the absolute world to me. With that being said, thank you and have a good day.